Luminous History is a game set in the Royal Luminous Academy. It is a highly popular dating action RPG with hundreds of characters, each with their own favorability ratings and individual routes. The game offers a great deal of freedom and many different endings. However, there is one character who always stands in the player's way. That character is Hugo Clay, the eldest son of the prestigious Clay Knight family. Hugo attempts to take the main heroine by force, and is ultimately defeated by the protagonist. Now that same Hugo lies asleep in the forest near the academy, wondering how he ended up here. To understand this, the story needs to return to the beginning. It begins with the protagonist, Cure Hugo, enjoying his favorite TV show when his mother reminds him that he is supposed to go out. Remembering the plans he made for the day, he quickly leaves the house. Hugo is an ordinary high school student in most ways, but if he has to choose one thing that sets him apart, it is his passion for heroes and everything related to them. This becomes clear as he grows excited at the sight of a newly released poster for his favorite movie. Without warning, he hears people screaming and telling others to run as an attacker armed with a knife targets random pedestrians. Amid the chaos, a boy trips and falls, becoming an easy target. Before the attacker can strike, Hugo rushes in, stopping and incapacitating him, saving the child. However, during the struggle, Hugo is stabbed and collapses to the ground. As he loses consciousness and sees the frightened boy crying, he believes himself a failure as the hero he always wished to become. He hopes that in his next life, he will be a true hero capable of protecting everyone. After slipping into unconsciousness, he suddenly opens his eyes and finds himself facing a young man pointing a sword at him. The white-haired boy declares his victory in their duel and announces that, as promised, he will now be taking someone named Claire. Hugo, overwhelmed by confusion, struggles to understand the situation. A girl named Claire appears and addresses the white-haired boy as Zenon, asking what is going on. Zenon explains that he has defeated Hugo Clay, who has been troubling her, and that their engagement is now annulled. With confidence, he proclaims that he will protect her from now on. Moved by his words, Claire thanks him sincerely, while the bewildered Hugo wonders what is happening and why he has to witness such a scene in the last moments of his life. His vision fades again, and he believes this collapse to be his true end. Yet he regains consciousness once more, this time finding himself in a bed. Looking around, he notices that the place resembles an infirmary and wonders why he is still alive. Approaching a nearby window to get a better sense of his surroundings, he catches sight of his reflection, one that looks entirely unfamiliar. Shocked, he instinctively demands to know what is happening. At first, he questions who the reflection belongs to, and when he realizes it is himself, he is stunned to discover that he is unusually handsome. An old man wearing something like a formal service uniform enters the room. Hugo fails to recognize him. The man immediately begins scolding him, calling him a disgrace to the family and declaring that he is now disowned, leaving Hugo even more confused. The old man continues, expressing his disappointment that Hugo was defeated by some nobody despite wielding a treasured sword named Gallandil. As Hugo stares in utter bewilderment, the man goes on, saying that he has tolerated Hugo's actions only because of his skills, but someone who repeatedly tarnishes the Clay family name is no longer needed. Hugo finally interrupts and insists that he has no idea what the man is talking about, asking who he even is. This only frustrates the old man further. Unable to continue, the man turns to leave, but not before announcing that Hugo will be expelled from the dormitory and must return the Gallandil sword. As Hugo tries to stop him, the man tells him to be grateful for the tuition the family covered and warns him never to use the Clay name again. With that, he leaves. From the man's tone, Hugo assumes he is meant to be a father, yet this person is nothing like the father in his memories. On top of that, the man clearly looks like a foreigner, deepening Hugo's confusion about the life he has suddenly awakened into. Just then, a boy enters the room and addresses him as brother. The boy expresses his relief that Hugo has regained consciousness and asks if he is okay, especially since their father left in such a rage. Hugo is a bit shocked to see the boy because he looks almost identical to the one he saved before he died. Setting that aside, he asks the boy who he is, which shocks the boy. The boy then asks if Hugo has lost his memory because of the duel he just had, and Hugo replies that it might be the case. He apologizes and again asks the boy who he is and who Hugo himself is. The boy informs him that his name is Hugo Clay, the eldest son of one of the most prestigious knight families, the Clay family, and the heir to the family heirloom Gallandil. The boy then introduces himself as Hugo's younger half-brother, Fee Clay, who is physically weaker and unable to become a knight. Fee explains that before Hugo lost consciousness, he had a duel with a classmate which he lost. On top of that, his fiancée, Claire, was taken because of the bet he made. With all this happening, their father considers him a disgrace to the family. Before Fee can explain further, Hugo gets up, stating that he understands this is one of those otherworld reincarnation situations, and that it is his first time experiencing anything like this. A few moments later at night, Hugo finds himself in a very odd situation. He is lying on the ground in a forest near the academy, wondering how things turned out like this. The academy he attends is Luminous Academy, where young people who aim to become magic knights enroll. It is a prestigious school from elementary to high school with luxurious dorm facilities. Despite being a student there, he is camping outside and wonders if this is some kind of karma, even though he saved someone before dying. From what he learned from Fee, it seems he has reincarnated into another world as a person with the same name, though this Hugo is quite different from him. This becomes evident when he is kicked out of the dorm, with people celebrating and claiming that karma has caught up to him, some even wishing for his death. This makes him wonder what the previous Hugo did to become so despised. He suspects the previous Hugo must have been someone who did whatever he pleased, while abusing the power of his family name and the sacred sword. But setting that aside for now, he is truly frustrated, as the night is very cold and he is extremely hungry, wishing for someone to save him. Just then, Fee arrives and expresses relief at finally finding him. He informs Hugo that he bought some food for him, which surprises Hugo as he thanks him. Later, while eating on a bench, he cannot stop praising how delicious the food is, and seeing this, Fee realizes Hugo was truly starving. Fee apologizes, saying he should have come sooner so Hugo wouldn't have had to endure the hunger. Hugo asks what he is talking about, since bringing the food is already more than enough, and he thanks Fee again, which surprises him. Fee then asks to confirm whether Hugo's memory still has not returned. He finds their father to be very cruel for disowning and kicking Hugo out in such a state. Hearing this, Hugo quickly tries to console him, saying that perhaps their father has his own circumstances. Fee then shares his plan to talk to their father to get Hugo's punishment lifted. Although Hugo appreciates Fee's kindness, recalling how angry that old man was, he does not think it is possible. Even if their father could be convinced, the hatred from those around him would remain. So he decides it is better to start fresh in a completely new situation. Although he still does not know why he was reincarnated into this world, he has no choice but to accept it. Fee takes a bracelet-like device from his bag and offers it to Hugo. Hugo asks what it is, and Fee tells him to try putting it on, so he does. Fee then tells him to pour his magic into the bracelet, which catches him off guard, and he tries to act normal since he never knew magic existed in this world. As Fee watches with excitement, Hugo laughs nervously, wondering if magic manipulation is common here. In this moment, he realizes that bluffing with memory loss has its limits, and even if he revealed his reincarnation, Fee would likely think the injury made him delusional. Hugo does not want to worry him further. Setting that aside, he focuses on the bracelet despite having no idea how to use magic. As he continues concentrating, the bracelet begins to shine, and suddenly he is wearing a suit similar to the one he liked in his previous life. Seeing the suit fills him with excitement, and he moves around, posing enthusiastically. He asks Fee what it is and how it happened, and although his question is urgent, Fee is simply relieved that the blaster's adjustment worked well. Hearing the name, Hugo asks if blaster is what this armor suit is called. Fee explains that the blaster is a full-body enchanted armor-type magic tool that expands when magic is infused into the bracelet. By channeling magic into the crystals placed throughout the armor, the wearer can deliver high-powered punches and kicks. Hearing this, Hugo excitedly asks if that means he can perform special moves. Fee confirms it, but adds that it is an old-type magical tool with only that function. So it is not a replacement for the sacred equipment Hugo used to handle so easily. Ignoring that detail, Hugo becomes emotional and thanks him for giving him something so amazing. Surprised, Fee asks if he is truly satisfied with an outdated magic tool when he once wielded a sacred sword as if it were a toy. Hugo replies by asking what he means, because to him this is the transformation item he always dreamed of. He tries the deactivation command to remove the armor, then the transformation command to summon it again. Overjoyed, he thanks Fee once more and lifts him up, embarrassing Fee, who tells him to put him down. Hugo continues thanking him, saying Fee keeps helping him again and again. Fee is surprised to receive such gratitude over something like this. Hugo then says being treated kindly is enough to make him happy, and having a little brother like Fee makes him feel like the happiest big brother in the world. Fee is caught off guard, deeply moved by his words. Since it is now late at night, Fee tells Hugo goodbye and says they will see each other tomorrow. Now that Hugo has the blaster, he believes he might truly become a hero who can make everyone smile. Filled with excitement, he cannot hold himself back and begins training immediately. Meanwhile, in the academy, Zenon wears a creepy smile, convinced he has finally rescued Claire from Hugo. It is then revealed that this person is not actually Zenon, but Heino, a reincarnator from another world. After losing his life in an accident, he and several others in similar situations were guided by a god and reincarnated into the world of a game he played all his life, in the role of Zenon Ash. Luminous History is a game set in the Royal Luminous Academy, a popular dating action RPG with hundreds of characters, each with its own favorability system and individual routes. The protagonist is a transfer student who builds bonds with friends during school life while facing various challenges and growing through the events. The main heroine and Cito's favorite character is Claire Rouge. In the prologue, Claire's lips are supposed to be forcibly taken by Hugo. That is why before the event could occur, Cito, now Zenon Ash, intervened and rescued her. From what he remembers of the game, after this event Hugo, who has lost everything, listens to the whispers of demons and sacrifices his own brother to gain power, only to be defeated by the protagonist, making it his destiny to meet a miserable death. Zenon considers this the perfect ending for Hugo. Setting that aside, since he has taken such drastic action, he suspects that the other reincarnator will likely start moving as well. However, even then, Zenon believes that in this world the one who will become the hero and enjoy the harem is going to be him. For now, he plans to spend some sweet time with his favorite Claire. These reincarnators were originally supposed to be the protagonists of this world. However, because of one otaku, the heroic story they envision is about to go astray, and as of now no one knows this yet. The next day when Hugo goes to the academy, he is challenged to a duel by another student. The boy introduces himself as Marcos Balg, and tells him to step onto the battle stage and become the rust on his blade. As any sane person would, Hugo declines, using the excuse that he has lost his memory. Although Marcos has already heard the rumor, he now confirms that Hugo truly has no recollection. Regardless, he still insists on fighting, which shocks Hugo. Confused, Hugo asks whether he did anything terrible to Marcos in the past that would make him persist like this. Marcos replies that he did not, but that he has been sick of Hugo for a long time, and now that Hugo has lost both his memory and his sacred sword, he finds it the perfect opportunity to crush him. He declares that he will make Hugo grovel on the ground and ensure he never rises again. This behavior leaves Hugo completely speechless. He then asks Marcos if anyone has ever told him that he has a horrible personality. Marcos seems like the kind of person who loudly declares whatever is on his mind, and Hugo wonders what sort of person the previous Hugo must have been to be hated by him as well. Setting that aside, Hugo starts walking away and apologizes again, saying he cannot accept the challenge because someone is waiting for him. Marcos, however, tells him not to worry about that and asks if he is referring to his little brother. Confused, Hugo turns to ask what he means, and another student approaches, addressing Marcos as Marcos-sama and announcing that he has brought Hugo's brother. When Hugo looks in their direction, he sees two students dragging Fee with them. Marcos praises them, saying their work will make things easier. Hearing this, Hugo asks what he is planning and why Fee is here. Marcos explains that in order to persuade Hugo to accept the duel, he brought Fee to cooperate. He declares that if Hugo refuses, his younger brother will take his place, which immediately angers Hugo. Fee tries to reassure him, saying the boys are not strong, but one of the students suddenly grips his hand hard enough to cause visible pain. Worried, Hugo demands they stop immediately. Marcos tells him he already knows what he must do, adding that Hugo is free to refuse if he wishes to see his brother suffer. With that, he challenges Hugo again, leaving him no choice but to accept. Hugo states one condition: they must release Fee first. If they do that, he will agree to the duel. Marcos accepts and orders his men to let Fee go. Once they comply, Fee apologizes for getting caught, and Hugo tells him not to worry as none of this is his fault. Marcos expresses his surprise, claiming he never imagined that the lowest, most evil scum would care for his family. Hugo fires back, equally surprised that someone as disgusting as Marcos exists in this academy. Moving on, Marcos explains that in this duel they will each wager one thing. He wagers that if he wins, Hugo will grovel on the ground and lick his shoes. Hugo agrees and wagers that if he wins, Marcos will never show his filthy face again. With that, the duel is set, but Marcos appears far too confident, as if the outcome is already written and Hugo is destined to lose. Moments later, as the duel begins, many students gather, most of them eager to see Hugo get defeated again. Fee apologizes once more, insisting the situation is his fault, and Hugo again assures him that it is not, placing the blame on their opponents instead. Besides, Fee has given him something very helpful that he needs at this moment. Fee protests, arguing that the blaster is an old model, but before he can continue, Hugo pats his hand and tells him not to worry. He will not lose as long as Fee believes in him. Marcos then arrives with a shield-like item of his own and asks if Hugo is ready to face humiliation. In response, Hugo bluntly remarks that if this is Marcos's magic tool, then his taste is truly terrible. Hearing this, Marcos tries to act high and mighty, announcing that this is a great magic tool passed down in their Balg family, the Giga Scissors. Hugo feels a wave of second-hand embarrassment, as the Giga Scissors is literally just a giant pair of scissors. Setting that aside, the tool seems somewhat similar to the one Fee gave him, so he quickly activates it and instantly suits up. Marcos bursts into laughter, mocking him for using such an old magic tool. The entire crowd begins cheering for Marcos, urging him to beat Hugo to a pulp and loudly expressing their hatred for him. Hugo notices the cheers and asks if the duel has already begun, to which Marcos confirms that it started the moment both of them activated their magic tools. Understanding this, Hugo suggests they get started properly, and hearing this, Marcos suspects that Hugo intends to lure him into close combat. But instead, Hugo begins preparing the same movements he practiced the night before. Marcos watches in confusion, wondering what Hugo is doing, then mocks him again, calling him a clown and asking if this is all he can manage. Ignoring him, Hugo continues his preparation, and after finally accumulating enough power, he fires the attack at Marcos. A cloud of dust erupts upon impact, leaving the students bewildered. Hugo, however, feels relieved that it worked. His practice from yesterday trying to imitate a hero-like move has truly paid off. He attributes his inspiration to the fictional characters from his world and decides to name the move Dragon Fang Blaster. Still, he remains aware that he only managed to strike Marcos because his guard was down. In a normal fight, an opponent's counterattack could prevent him from releasing that magic bullet, so he plans to refine and improve the move later. Setting that aside for now, he prepares for the opponent's counter. However, after taking the hit, Marcos appears completely immobilized, staring in disbelief at his defeat. This confuses not only Hugo but also Fee and the other student, and Hugo asks Fee if he truly managed to beat that guy. Fee, still shocked, confirms it, which leads Hugo to believe that a special move should feel exciting only at the end of a fight. Fee tries to explain that this is not the point right now, and suggests they leave the area immediately. Later, Hugo apologizes to Fee, feeling guilty for putting him in danger and for making them miss lunch. Fee replies with admiration in his eyes, telling him not to worry. What matters more to him is how amazed he is that Hugo can use Blaster so well, firing magic bullets right from the start. Hugo then asks whether this armor is really an old model, since it allowed him to defeat Marcos in a single attack. Fee explains that Blaster is a mass-produced model from decades ago, and more importantly, full armor-type magic tools are not very strong. This shocks Hugo, who finds them cool and believes their defense seems high. Although he is correct about the defensive aspect, Fee explains that full body armor cannot exponentially improve his abilities. More importantly, any magic knight with proper combat training can enhance physical abilities with magic and can protect themselves with a barrier, making heavy armor unnecessary. Hugo begins to understand. He then asks, since magic tools continue to advance, what would happen if someone created a new full body armor using light and robust metal. Fee explains that a single suit of armor requires enormous time and effort to craft, and given the cost, it is unsuitable for mass production. Beyond that, it comes down to convenience. Blaster can channel magic through all limbs, but it offers no additional functionality, and if a magic knight attacks using a separate magic tool, there is no point in wearing heavy armor at all. Devastated by this explanation, Hugo thanks Fee, feeling he has just glimpsed a sad reality. He realizes that although transforming heroes are cool, in a world where people are strong on their own, efficiency is valued far more than style. Seeing his brother so distraught, Fee quickly tries to cheer him up, explaining that full-body armor tools are not entirely extinct. Some remain passed down through prestigious families. Hearing this, Hugo recalls that Marcos mentioned his scissors were also an heirloom. More importantly, he remembers how everyone has been treating him poorly except for one person. He asks Fee why he is so kind to him, because even without memories, he can tell he is the most hated student in the academy. Fee is stunned by the question. With a warm smile, he explains that Hugo is his benefactor. Although Hugo no longer remembers, he was the only one in their household who ever showed Fee kindness. Fee grew up as an illegitimate child, born with a weak body and no talent to become a magic knight. Because of that, their parents treated him coldly, and even he believed he was worthless until Hugo saved him. At his lowest point, Hugo told him that even if he had no talent as a magic knight, he had talent as a researcher. Hugo also promised that when he became head of the family, he would make Fee his right-hand man. The fact that someone acknowledged him made Fee genuinely happy. Because of that promise, he worked with everything he had and managed to enter Luminous Academy. If not for Hugo, Fee would still be trapped in that lonely house with no place where he belonged. Everything he has now exists because of Hugo. Learning all this, Hugo is very surprised, and Fee adds that Hugo is truly impressive for doing exactly what he promised and winning. Because of this, Fee plans to believe in Hugo wholeheartedly, convinced that he will keep winning no matter what others say. Since that is the case, Hugo decides he cannot afford to feel discouraged either, so he chooses to move forward and become the kind of older brother Fee can be proud of. Fee responds with certainty that Hugo can achieve this, since in Fee's eyes Hugo is a hero. The words catch Hugo off guard, and he silently thanks Fee. Determined, he decides that this time he will definitely protect the smile directed at him and live up to Fee's expectations. Setting that aside, he suddenly remembers that there is still some time left before lunch break and suggests they check the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Zenon grows frustrated, wondering what any of this means and how it happened. He is confused because he has played through this game countless times, yet he has never heard of a duel event between Hugo and Marcos. In the same year as the protagonist is the character Marcos Balg, who can be recruited early on. However, he is the kind of character who becomes sidelined as the story progresses. In the original story, although he is hostile toward Hugo, he never acts on it out of fear of Hugo's magic sword Gallandil. Because of this, he sets his sights on the protagonist instead, whom he considers weaker than Hugo, beginning the Marcos event in which he challenges the protagonist to a duel. After losing the duel, Marcos joins the protagonist's party and grows in the right direction while competing with him. Recalling this information, Zenon realizes that Marcos fears only Hugo's Gallandil. But since this version of Hugo loses to Zenon and has Gallandil confiscated, Marcos takes the opportunity to challenge Hugo himself. Realizing this, Zenon wonders if the event changed because of his interference, and considering the impact it could have on the original story, he understands it is no trivial matter. He is fortunate that no reincarnator is targeting Marcos, because if this event involved a popular character, he truly would have been in trouble. Now that he thinks about it, there is a popular heroine whose popularity rivals Claire. He feels a bit bad for Claire, but in a reincarnation into another world, he intends to build a harem, so he plans to aim for that girl next. Later, they arrive at the cafeteria, and Hugo is surprised by how luxurious it is. Just then, a student calls out to him as Hugo Clay but quickly corrects himself, saying that since Hugo was disowned, he is simply Hugo now, and asks whether he even has money to eat here. The students go as far as calling him shameless for sponging money off his little brother, which he openly admits is embarrassing, shocking the two. Hugo decides on the spot that he needs to earn his own living somehow, because even if he camps outside, he will need a tent strong enough to withstand rain and wind. So he asks the two students if they know of any job openings. Hearing this, a female student approaches and asks if he is really looking for work. When he confirms it, she suggests that they team up. She introduces herself as Melt Epi, a transfer student at the school. Hugo introduces himself as Hugo Clay, though he admits he is unsure whether he can still use the Clay name after being disowned, something she already seems aware of. She asks to confirm that he was disowned after losing a duel to a transfer student and is now trying to earn money to live, to which Hugo awkwardly agrees. Melt finds the situation convenient, saying that there is a good quest that requires 2 people. Hugo then asks about the quest and explains that he has lost his memory, so he has forgotten many things. Surprised by this, she explains that a quest is a cooperative job commissioned by a local resident in order to instill the students with a sense of awareness as future magic knights who will protect the people. The academy posts these kinds of jobs for students, and after completing a quest, they receive payment. Some students even earn their living expenses this way. Hearing this, Hugo realizes that Melt approached him because she needs money. He finds these quests similar to part-time jobs or internships offered by the school and is surprised by the resemblance. Setting that aside, he asks Melt what kind of quest she plans to take. She responds by taking out a piece of paper and handing it to him, and he discovers that it is a patrol duty on a nearby road. Now that he understands, she asks if the reward for this quest looks good, but Hugo, who knows nothing about the prices in this world, cannot bring himself to give a straightforward answer. Since he has to rely on quests to earn a living, he decides to give it a try and tells Melt that he accepts her offer. This makes her extremely happy as she explains that today is the deadline for the quest and she was about to give up. As he is telling her that she is getting too close, Fee calls out to him. Fee has returned with the meal tickets and asks Hugo who the girl beside him is. Before he can explain, Melt introduces herself as Hugo's friend. Hearing this, Fee asks Hugo if it is true, and when he confirms, tears begin to fall from Fee's eyes. Fee expresses how happy he is that Hugo has made a friend and he almost feels as if he is dreaming. Hugo feels a slight sting at the way Fee phrases it and asks if Fee is making fun of him. Noticing their interaction, Melt comments that his little brother is really fond of him and that Hugo seems completely different from what she has heard. A bit bashful, Hugo says that he lost his memory, so he might be a little different from before. Melt argues that even so, if he had truly been a bad person, his little brother would not like him this much. So she believes he is not as bad as he thinks. She adds that she is glad he is her first friend in the academy. Hugo finds Melt to be a very kind girl and believes that if she were in the TV show he used to like, she would definitely be a main character. Setting that aside, with this first friend since his reincarnation, he feels that he has finally taken his first step in this world. The next day, Melt and Hugo arrive at their quest destination, and Hugo feels as if he has stepped into an actual anime. He is amazed to see a steam train running along the tracks. Melt explains that it is a magic train and reveals that she had never seen one herself until she came here. Hearing this, Hugo asks if trains are rare, and she explains that because this area is close to the capital, trains pass through here, while she comes from the countryside and has only ridden carriages. She is sure they will have the chance to ride one someday, and she tells Hugo to look forward to it. Since he has lost his memory, it will feel as exciting as his first time, and he agrees, saying that losing his memory is not so bad after all. Setting that aside, Hugo comments that being stationed for highway security seems to involve a lot of free time, and Melt agrees, saying that if there is another guard at the end of the tunnel, they are probably not busy either. Hugo finds this reassuring because if the guards have plenty of time, it means the area is peaceful, and Melt agrees again. She adds that even if it is peaceful, they get paid the same, so she would rather things stay quiet. Then suddenly, they hear a loud noise that shocks them, and Hugo wonders what that sound is. At that moment, Melt receives a message on her bracelet, leaving her confused since there is still time before their quest is scheduled to end. After speaking with someone from the station, Melt explains that the train from earlier still hasn't arrived at the station. Hugo suspects there must be some kind of trouble in the tunnel and wonders aloud if the train could have run out of fuel. Melt responds that she doesn't know and suggests they enter the tunnel to check it out, a plan he agrees to. Moments later, they step inside and find the interior so dark that Hugo can't see anything, not even the faint outline of the exit. Melt believes the darkness is caused by a slight curve in the tunnel that blocks the light. While discussing it, she missteps and nearly falls, but manages to regain her balance, unintentionally giving Hugo a glimpse of something. She straightens up quickly, flustered, and asks if he saw anything. Although he notices a flash of purple, he denies seeing anything, claiming the tunnel is too dark. Still doubtful, she asks if he is telling the truth, and he reassures her while pointing out that she stumbled because she was moving too recklessly in the darkness. He then asks if they have any kind of light source. Hearing this, she tells him to wait and raises her hand. A glowing knife-like object materializes before her, and she instructs Hugo to hold only the handle and not the blade. Confused, he watches as she explains that this is her magic tool, Sword Ring. She demonstrates how she can shape her magical energy into light, a versatility that impresses him. But then he notices something else. Melt is a beautiful girl from a faraway land, dressed in purple, somewhat clumsy, and capable of making swords of light. These traits feel eerily similar to a certain character he knows. Melt asks what he is spacing out for, and now that they have light, she suggests they move quickly and locate the train. He nervously agrees and decides to go ahead first so he can warn her of any uneven ground. She accepts. They eventually find the train, but Hugo notices something strange. He can't hear anyone inside. Melt also wonders what could have happened and whether the passengers and engineer abandoned the train. Hugo quickly prepares himself and says he will go in first, instructing her to follow behind. She agrees but reminds him to be careful. After opening the train gate, he announces himself and asks if anyone is present. As he looks around, the interior feels eerily quiet, making him wonder what is actually happening since even an abandoned train shouldn't feel this unnerving. Melt approaches to ask if he has found anything but slips again, prompting Hugo to ask if she is okay, noting that this is the second time. She insists it isn't her fault this time because the floor is slippery. Suddenly a voice laughs, remarking that Hugo has quite a clumsy partner. Hugo immediately recognizes it. Marco stands there, commenting that the two of them make a great duo. Seeing him, Hugo refers to him as the Crab Noble, which irritates him, and he corrects the name to Marco's Balg. Setting that aside, Marcos admits he didn't expect Hugo to be the one guarding the other side of the tunnel. More surprisingly, he says, is the fact that a woman is willing to team up with someone like Hugo. After watching her stumble, however, he dismisses her as nothing more than an absent-minded country bumpkin. Melt retorts by asking why a high and mighty noble such as him is accepting such a trivial quest. Before he can respond, she bluntly asks if he is having money problems. Caught off guard, he denies it at first but then explains that his parents discovered he lost a duel and cut off his allowance. He tries to brush it off as unimportant, but Melt giggles, feeling vindicated. Hugo tells both of them to stop fighting because this is not the right time. He then asks Marcos, since he came from the other end, if he found anyone on his way. Marcos replies that he did not see anyone, and from the way they are asking, he figures out it is the same for them as well. This can only mean that everyone has simply disappeared, every single one of them, which shocks Melt. As Hugo wonders if people really vanished like smoke, Marcos explains that his subordinate is already investigating the train, so they should stay quiet and watch for now. Hugo is about to argue that they need to report this immediately, but he suddenly hears something. Melt notices his reaction and asks what is going on and if something happened. Hugo says he just heard a child's voice and that it should be close by. Marcos, hearing nothing himself, says it must be Hugo's imagination. However, Hugo is certain and quickly gets out of the train to follow the voice, while Melt runs after him, telling him to wait. Hugo stops where he believes the voice came from, and Melt warns him that it is dangerous to rush out like that. But under the train, there truly is a little girl lying there. Hugo is relieved that the girl is unharmed and simply unconscious, while Melt praises his sharp hearing. Before Hugo can respond, the girl weakly opens her eyes and he asks if she is awake. Once she regains full consciousness, she quickly pulls away from him, screaming as though terrified of something. Hugo tells her to calm down, assuring her that he is on her side and is here to save her. The girl then asks if he is really here to save Mina, and Hugo confirms it. Learning her name, he introduces himself. He explains that they heard the train stop inside the tunnel, so they came to investigate. When she hears about the train, she begins trembling and mentions her mother. Hugo gently asks if she can tell them what happened, and she answers that her mother and everyone else were taken by a Magi beast. The name confuses Hugo, while Melt appears shocked. She suggests they return to the train because Mina might not feel safe here, and it would be wise to share this information with Marcos. Hugo agrees. Moments later, they bring Mina inside the train, and Melt calls out to Hugo to look at what she found. What she discovered looks like a thick, sticky thread, something Hugo does not recognize. Melt explains that it was attached to Mina's body, and though she is not fully certain, she believes it to be spider silk. Hugo, shocked, asks if she is saying there are spiders that can make threads this massive. She clarifies that it is not from a spider but from a Magi beast, monsters born from the souls of deceased monsters possessing the bodies of other creatures. Realizing this, Hugo asks if she means they are dealing with something created from the fusion of two monsters, and she nods. Although he expected that in a world with magic there would be monsters, he never imagined anything like the villains from his favorite show. At that moment, Marcos confirms that it is indeed a Magi beast. Judging from the traces his subordinate found, it appears to be the work of goblins possessing the power of a giant spider. Hugo then asks him how he figured this out, to which he points out that no matter how much spider silk the beast uses, a single monster cannot abduct all the passengers. In other words, the culprits who attacked the train acted as a group, and goblins are the only monsters in this area known to move in groups. He suspects they hid in the shadows, set traps inside the tunnel, and then ambushed the train before taking the passengers. He further explains that the kidnappers likely kept the passengers alive to gather provisions and breeding hosts. He guesses that right now the abducted people are probably being transported to the monster's den, and once they reach the nest the creatures will begin. Before he finishes, Hugo firmly stops him, saying it is not something he should say in front of a child whose mother was taken away. Realizing he let his mouth run wild, he apologizes, admitting it was thoughtless of him. Moving on, if what Marcos says is true, then the passengers are in danger, so Mel suggests they should do something to help them. However, Marcos states that there is nothing they can do, as his subordinates only found these threads throughout the entire train, making it impossible to track the monsters down. As Mel tries to argue further, Hugo stops him, and after sitting down he asks if this is the place where she tripped. She replies affirmatively, and as she begins to ask why, Hugo finds something liquid on the ground. He rubs it between his fingers and Mel asks what it is. He replies that it is neither blood nor water, instead it is oil. He explains that some species of spider secrete oil so their silk does not stick to their limbs. Since she tripped here and said the surface felt wet, he decided to check it just in case. Mel feels a bit glad that her clumsiness gives Hugo a spark of inspiration. Moving on, Hugo suggests following the oil trail while one of them goes out of the tunnel with Mina to contact the station. Even though he finds it irritating to follow Hugo's plan, Marcos decides to go along with it since Hugo was the one who discovered the trail. He orders his subordinate to take the little girl outside the tunnel and report to the station. And because she is a lady, he tells him to treat her with utmost courtesy. Hugo then assures Mina that he will definitely bring her mother back and asks her to wait outside for a little while. With that assurance, she agrees and before leaving asks them to be careful. With this, Hugo is determined to rescue the kidnapped people without a single casualty. Following the oil trail, they eventually arrive at the Magi Beast's den. The kidnapped passengers are indeed there, but there are no magi beasts in sight, only ordinary goblins who seem to be on lookout duty. However, a giant magi beast goblin emerges from the cave with its minions. Seeing this creature, Hugo finds it deeply unsettling as it is not a man-spider but a goblin-spider hybrid. Mel then asks him if he sees any aracha, a term he does not understand. Mel explains that it is the name given to these magi beasts, derived from the spider monster arachne and the word sharp claw. Just as Hugo finds this name better than simply calling them spider monsters, he notices that Marcos is missing. Marcos nonchalantly approaches the magi beast, calling it an unsightly creature. He walks straight up to the monster, introduces himself, and even declares his intention to cut off its head. Utterly shocked by this reckless behavior, Hugo wonders what in the world this man is doing. He was planning to act stealthily, but now he has no other choice. While Marcos distracts the aracha, they must rescue the passengers without getting caught. He quickly tells Mel to hurry, as they need to free the trapped passengers, and she agrees. Just like that, they begin freeing the passengers and tell them to calm down while Hugo removes the threads. However, he finds it difficult to cut them and realizes it will take them far too long to rescue everyone with just the two of them. More importantly, he figures out that these threads can only be cut with magic. Then a loud crash echoes through the area, and he finds Marcos sent hurtling into a wall while all he can do is call the creature a cowardly monster. Hearing this, Hugo notices that the monster used its thread to bind Marcos' scissors, rendering them unusable, which shocks him because it means the monster understands its opponent's weakness. Hugo realizes that what makes the aracha more frightening is not its immobilizing threads or its sharp claws, but its goblin-like cunning that allows it to identify weaknesses. Then suddenly he notices that there are only 3 aracha present, even though there should be a group large enough to carry away this many passengers. Just as he thinks about it, an aracha shoots a thread at his hand. As Melt worriedly calls out to him, she is caught by 2 aracha. She struggles to break free and orders them to stop as the creature wraps its arm around her. Terrified, she begins tearing up, insisting she will not let creatures like these perverted magi beasts do whatever they want. Not wasting another second, Hugo quickly frees himself, equips the blaster suit, and pulls Melt away from the goblin. He fully charges his magic power and leaps toward the duo of aracha, obliterating one with a single strike. As the other rushes in, he uses a move named Blaster Dynamic Slash to blow it away, claiming it is strong enough to make them cry, shocking Melt and everyone around them, though they are even more surprised that he says the technique's name afterward. Setting that aside, Hugo asks Melt if he can leave the rest of the passengers to her. She accepts and asks what he plans to do, and he informs her that he is going to team up with Marcos to defeat the remaining magi beast. He then goes to Marcos and tells him to use Melt's magic tool, the sword ring, to free his scissors, but Marcos is too distracted by the fact that Hugo defeated 2 aracha by himself. He refuses, insisting that someone like him does not need help, but Hugo points out that Marcos cannot continue fighting in his current state. He suggests that Marcos calm down and work with him, but Marcos refuses again. While he is distracted, the monster takes the opportunity to kick him in the stomach, sending him crashing into a wall once more. As Hugo calls out Marcos' name in worry, Melt tells him to jump. He does, and she summons many more sword rings and hurls them at the aracha. As the attack deals significant damage, Hugo thanks her and prepares to deliver the finishing blow. He unleashes his explosion attack again, instantly eliminating the 2 smaller aracha. Only the large one remains, and upon witnessing what happened, it tries to run, but it cannot escape while Hugo watches. He borrows Melt's ring sword, and after infusing it with enough lightning magic, leaps toward the creature. Stabbing it with the sword, he releases all the lightning at once, causing the aracha's body to explode. Later, they bring all the passengers back to the station, where Mina reunites with her mother, which makes Melt relieved and happy. She believes it is all thanks to Hugo that no one is hurt, but he notes that it was not just him and that their teamwork made it possible, and he thanks her for that. Flustered, she argues that it was his idea to begin with and asks if they really made a good team. Hugo agrees, saying he is glad that they are partners. Just then, Mina approaches them with her mother and expresses her gratitude for saving her. Hugo tells her that they should be the ones thanking her, because her warning about the magi beast allowed them to act. Overjoyed, she asks if that makes her a hero like him, and Hugo affirms it, telling her she has done well. As they leave, Melt suggests that they keep taking quests together, as she trusts him and believes they can accomplish anything. Hugo agrees and says he also feels reassured having Melt as his partner. Once again, they both look forward to working together. While the two chat, Marcos watches from afar with his fist clenched. He is still stunned by the power Hugo displayed. His subordinates then arrive and urge him to treat his injuries immediately. He refuses and orders them to make his training even harder starting tomorrow, and they accept without question. He has made up his mind to grow stronger and show Hugo his true power next time. As Marcos leaves, someone observing him from a nearby rooftop is surprised to see that the darkness in Marcos's heart has vanished. The mysterious figure did not expect this and decides to search for another target. Meanwhile, back at the academy, Zenon, a reincarnator, learns that Melt's scenario route option has disappeared and that he can no longer recruit her as an ally. He is utterly shocked and cannot understand how or why this has happened. Melt was supposed to be a character who would definitely join the main character, so her route vanishing leaves him confused. He recalls his duel with Hugo and wonders if this is his fault, believing he might have taken Claire from Hugo earlier than intended. More importantly, he worries about how the other reincarnators will react to Melt's route disappearing. Devastated, he refuses to accept responsibility and convinces himself it is simply a bug in the game. He remains in disbelief that Melt's route is gone and deludes himself into thinking she was meant to be his. The next day at the Academy cafeteria, Fee is surprised to learn that Hugo managed to defeat a Magi beast one-on-one, and he did it using an old magic tool no less. Hugo credits the achievement entirely to Fee, who adjusted the blaster for him, and adds that punching and kicking suit him far better than fighting with a sword. This surprises Fee, as fighting with only one's fists is not something anyone can easily do. Yet Hugo has been performing remarkably well ever since he lost his memory. At first, Fee was very worried, having heard that Hugo used to slack off and rely mostly on Galandil's power. But seeing him now, Fee struggles to believe that Hugo ever neglected his training. He wonders if the old Hugo, before losing his memory, was hiding his true power and even lost the duel on purpose. Fee suspects that Hugo might have grown tired of living under constant threat from both inside and outside the family, and perhaps that is why he did not seem too devastated when he was disowned. Fee believes that Hugo simply wanted to be free, and now that he has achieved that freedom, he might have awakened the true self buried deep in his heart. As his brother, seeing Hugo enjoy his new life and demonstrate such remarkable achievements fills Fee with pride. He hopes Hugo can continue like this so everyone will recognize the hero he truly is. Just then they are approached by Melt, who appears troubled and clearly wants to talk about something. Noticing her expression, Hugo asks if something is wrong as she does not look well. She nervously giggles and, sounding exhausted, says that the matter is not unrelated to him, which confuses Hugo. A moment later, a student bursts into the cafeteria looking for Melt. Upon seeing Hugo, he considers the timing perfect, further confusing Hugo. The student calls out to him and demands that Hugo release Melt immediately. Completely baffled, Hugo asks what he means, not wanting to be dragged into a fight out of nowhere. The student responds with insults and accuses him of deceiving unsuspecting transfer students like Melt to make them his own. Taken aback, Hugo quickly tries to explain that this is a misunderstanding, but the student refuses to listen. He introduces himself as Rush Wilhelm and declares that he will not forgive Hugo's heinous acts. Melt immediately intervenes, calling out to Rush and insisting that she is not being deceived, as she is the one who invited Hugo. Rush refuses to listen to her as well, claiming that Hugo is a dangerous man a girl like her should not be involved with. Hugo agrees that he has done terrible things in the past and regrets them, but he swears he is not trying to deceive Melt, something Rush has difficulty believing. Rush claims there is no need to hear anything from someone like Hugo and turns to the surrounding students for validation. Almost all of them side with Rush, agreeing that Hugo is indeed that kind of person. With their approval, Rush warns Hugo never to go near Melt again. Having had enough, Hugo admits that he may be trash, but demands to know who Rush thinks he is to interfere in Melt's relationships. Melt supports Hugo, stating that she decides who her friends are and that someone she has only just met has no right to dictate anything to her. This enrages Rush. Approaching Hugo, he says that Melt may think he is meddling, but believes she will one day understand his intentions. He then grabs Hugo by the collar and throws him onto the benches, shocking Fee. Fee asks Rush what he is doing, reminding him that it is dangerous to attack someone out of nowhere. Rush calls Hugo trash again and asks Fee if he is his brother. Fee defends him, insisting that Hugo is not trash and that Rush is the real trash for ganging up on and bullying a single person. Annoyed, Rush grows even angrier, especially when Fee adds that Hugo is an amazing person who defeated a Magi beast, proving he is not trash like them. In a burst of anger, Rush throws a punch at Fee. Before the blow can land, Hugo instantly steps in and catches the punch, protecting his brother. This shocks Rush as he cannot budge his hand at all while Hugo apologizes for his brother's rudeness. However, he adds that Rush and the others may say whatever they want about him. It is fine. But if they ever dare to lay a hand on Fee, that becomes a different story, and he will never forgive anyone who makes his brother cry. After saying this, he releases Rush's hand, leaving Rush growling like an angry dog. Utterly humiliated, Rush resorts to challenging Hugo to a duel, which Hugo accepts immediately, but only on the condition that if he wins, Rush will never lay a hand on his brother or friends again. The demand further infuriates Rush. But ignoring it, Hugo walks with Melt and Fee toward the duel arena. Moments later, the arena fills with students eager to watch the duel, most of them loudly cheering for Rush to beat Hugo to a pulp. Rush smiles at the crowd, thanking them and promising to do exactly as they want. Seeing this, Hugo feels a moment of surprise at how deeply he is disliked, as his side of the arena remains completely empty. Melt apologizes to Hugo and Fee for dragging them into this, but Hugo reassures her not to worry, saying it is their own fault for not listening to her earlier. Patting her shoulder, he reminds her that even if Rush has more supporters, he has two people cheering for him right now. Melt is touched by his words, and Fee agrees as well, insisting that Hugo will never lose. Taken aback, Hugo pats Fee's head, thinking of him as the best little brother. As it is time for the duel, he steps into the arena while Fee and Melt cheer him on. Everyone seems thrilled at the idea of Rush and Hugo clashing, which irritates Fee and Melt. Hugo then informs Rush that he is ready whenever he is, asking whether Rush is prepared as well. Rush responds confidently, claiming he will defeat Hugo for everyone's sake. With both sides committing to a fair fight, the referee begins the duel and both activate their magic tools. Rush makes the first move. Shifting into position, he slashes at Hugo from a distance, launching cutting attacks that Hugo narrowly evades. Hugo is surprised by the nature of these slashes, which behave like blades of wind, much like a kame-tachi. He suspects Rush's magic tool converts mana into flying blades, which means the attacks follow the direction of the sword, therefore dodging them is not particularly difficult. He does exactly that, slipping past each attack with ease, shocking Rush. Hugo strategizes that closing the distance and entering Rush's sword range will make the fight much easier to win. Following the plan, he rushes forward, only to be struck from behind. Losing his footing, he falls, bewildered by the unexpected attack angle. Then another figure stands beside Rush, asking whether Hugo truly thought he could get close that easily. Hugo is stunned to see that the figure is none other than a clone of Rush. Rush reminds him that he never said he would use only one magic tool. He is using two, Windrum and the Avatar Ring. With this, Rush declares that someone using an outdated magic tool like Hugo is no match for him. Shocked, Hugo wonders if this clone creation resembles the ability from one of his favorite shows. Rush declares again that he will crush Hugo completely, and every ring on his hand begins to glow. Using all of his avatar rings, he summons several more clones, all of whom launch attacks simultaneously. Hugo manages to dodge them, but Rush laughs hysterically, demanding to know how it feels to be overwhelmed and forced to witness the difference in their strength. Hugo finds the situation overwhelming, remarking that he is not some villain from a Sentai show, though he now understands how those villains must have felt. At that moment, he fails to block several incoming attacks and is struck multiple times, prompting the students to cheer wildly. Only Melt and Fee refrain, calling out to Hugo in worry, though he appears to be holding on despite his injuries. Rush then smugly asks whether Hugo is out of breath and wonders if he should give him a moment to rest. After a brief pause, Hugo nonchalantly says he will accept Rush's offer, as it is exactly what he wants, which shocks Melt and Fee. Since Rush truly gives him a moment to breathe, Hugo tries to come up with different strategies. He realizes that even if he manages to strike one target, he will likely be attacked by the clones and overwhelmed. Frustrated, he wishes he had a long-range move like Melt's purple sword. Then, from the thought of the color purple, he remembers something and believes that with that person's fighting style, he might actually have a chance. He stands up and takes a pose, prompting Rush to stare in confusion, wondering what is going on with that stance. Hugo is performing the technique of a Sentai warrior who fights with beast-style martial arts and upholds an iron will. With this, Hugo declares that things are about to get exciting. Rush wonders again about the strange stance and whether it is just a bluff. He comments that Hugo looks like a cat on guard, which surprises Hugo because he is aiming for a wolf-like impression. Setting that aside, Hugo suggests they continue, and Rush replies that he will crush all of Hugo's antics and end the fight immediately. He launches another barrage of slashes, which Hugo easily dodges using his new movements. But one of Rush's clones suddenly attacks from behind. Hugo dodges again and leaps toward the clone. Rush watches closely, confused about what Hugo is planning, as Hugo simply increases his speed and charges at one of the duplicates. Deciding this is the time to finish things, Rush plans to crush Hugo with all the clones at once. Before he can act, Hugo drives his knee into the clone's face, moving so quickly that Rush is momentarily stunned. Hugo acknowledges that he cannot reach Rush effectively with his hands and feet, so he will be relying on his knees from now on. His plan is to enhance his speed with magic power so he can deliver sharp strikes and retreat before getting surrounded. Shocked, Rush demands to know what kind of martial arts style this is, as he has never seen anyone fight like that. Hugo explains that it is his own style, Oryu. Annoyed and nervous, Rush, or one of his clones, leaps forward to attack, but Hugo notices that their coordination is beginning to falter. He dodges the strike, hits the clone in the chest, and then follows with an elbow to the head, eliminating it. Hugo calls out to the remaining clones, declaring that they are not finished yet. Rush and his duplicates are stunned, wondering what this guy even is and asking how he can move like that in such heavy armor. Hugo replies that he does not consider the armor heavy at all. In fact, he feels lighter when wearing it. This answer shocks Rush even more, as he points out that if armor like that truly existed, full-body magic tool armor would never have become obsolete. Hugo keeps fighting, eliminating the clones one by one. The greatest ability he possesses is the power of imagination. The fantasies from his favorite shows have turned him into one of the strongest individuals in this world. The body of the talented Hugo Clay and the kind soul of Cure Hugo combine into a man whose powerful imagination translates directly into combat, allowing him to fight with perfect faithfulness to the hero he admires. Henshin heroes possess ultimate power, and because Hugo completely trusts in that childlike belief, he is able to display incredible strength. One by one, he destroys every clone, leaving only Rush. Hugo suggests they settle this one-on-one. Enraged and anxious, Rush charges in, swearing he will end Hugo with his own hands. Hugo apologizes, saying he will end it here. He rushes forward, slams Rush with his crimson fist, and follows with a rising crimson fist. Completely defeated, Rush stares in disbelief, unable to understand how Hugo could be this strong. Hugo accepts the unspoken compliment as Rush loses consciousness, giving Hugo a clear victory. After removing the suit, Hugo faces the other students and asks if anyone else wants to fight him. They all nervously decline. With that settled, he asks if they will finally stop messing with him and tells them to take care of Rush. Noticing how the student cheering for Rush changes his tone the moment Rush loses, Hugo finds the reaction strangely amusing, but before he can finish the thought, Melt and Fee call out to him. They express their happiness over his victory and Fee compliments his strength. Moving on with excitement, Melt asks him what those moves were, completely enchanted by his performance. As Hugo starts crediting his win to their cheering, someone calls out his name in anger. The person is none other than Zenon, who accuses Hugo of being a coward and claims he cheated. Zenon refuses to believe Hugo is strong enough to defeat Rush. Hugo responds by asking Zenon to identify himself before yelling at him. Annoyed, Zenon gives his name and demands to know whether Hugo has truly forgotten him. Hugo apologizes, admitting that even with the name he cannot remember because he lost his memory. Zenon replies that the memory loss was his doing, so Hugo should at least remember that. Hearing this exchange, Melt calls out to Zenon and asks what he means by saying Hugo cheated in the duel. Surprised that she approaches him with genuine curiosity, Zenon first apologizes for showing this side of himself. He then argues that the outcome of the battle is strange, especially since he once defeated Hugo. He claims Hugo's sudden growth is unnatural, and a few nearby students timidly agree. Encouraged, Zenon pushes further, insisting that someone without a proper magic tool could not possibly win, so Hugo must have cheated. Hugo answers the accusation calmly, stating that he did not cheat and won simply by fighting normally. However, Zenon refuses to accept this and tells him not to lie, insisting it is impossible for Hugo to be this strong. Melt intervenes, saying she understands why Zenon is suspicious, but she argues that Hugo was just as strong when they fought the Magi Beast. Zenon claims she is being deceived and insists that the battle was staged to fool her. He points out that even if Hugo is a scoundrel, he is still the eldest son of a prominent family, giving him enough influence to arrange such a scheme. As Melt tries to protest that Hugo would never do such a thing, Zenon cuts her off and declares that Hugo is rotten and would do anything to achieve his goals. Hearing this explanation, the surrounding students become even more convinced that Hugo cheated, reasoning that someone like him would never save others. Zenon tells Melt she should not associate with people like Hugo and promises to protect her if she stays by his side. In the game Luminous History, the main character possesses a privilege called Charismatic Smile, which makes anyone trust him. Believing himself to be the protagonist, Zenon assumes Melt will naturally become his ally. Instead, she bluntly calls him extremely creepy and asks if he even understands what he is saying, shocking him. Melt finds his claim that Hugo arranged the entire Magi Beast incident ridiculous. Seeing her reaction, Zenon becomes uneasy, convinced something is wrong because events are not unfolding the way they should. Melt continues, saying Zenon is disrespecting every person who risked their life during that incident, especially since he was not even present and has no right to judge any of them. Zenon becomes further confused, wondering what happened to the protagonist's natural correction. Melt then states that she once thought Zenon was an amazing person everyone called a hero, but just like Hugo, she finds him the complete opposite of the rumors. He is the worst. Hearing this devastates Zenon. He refuses to accept that someone who views himself as the protagonist could be rejected. Convinced it is all Hugo's fault, he decides that since he managed to take Claire from Hugo with a duel, he will reclaim his position the same way. He challenges Hugo to another duel, declaring that if he wins, Hugo must let Melt go. Ignoring Zenon, Melt tells Hugo to look at her. As he turns toward her expecting a question, Melt rises on her toes and kisses him, completely shocking him. Even more stunned is Zenon, who cannot believe what he is witnessing and desperately hopes it is a dream. Melt releases Hugo and tells Zenon to never say he will duel again. She has just shown everyone that she stays with Hugo by her own will, and Zenon is only causing trouble. Hearing this, the surrounding students fall into stunned silence before breaking into whispers. Ignoring them and slightly embarrassed, Melt takes Hugo's hand and begins dragging him away, calling for Fee to follow. Fee, who has watched the entire scene unfold, becomes flustered and nervously agrees, leaving the arena with them. Behind them remains a devastated Zenon, who still refuses to accept the situation and wonders how it could have happened. Once outside the arena, Hugo and Melt are equally flustered by what just occurred. Melt apologizes for acting so suddenly, and Hugo nervously insists he should be the one to apologize. Melt asks him why, but he stumbles through his explanation, too embarrassed to speak clearly. Melt then directly asks whether he disliked being kissed by someone like her, which he immediately denies. He explains that he simply feels ashamed for making Melt do something so bold just to calm a situation he caused, and she smiles upon hearing it. She admits she didn't dislike it either and cheerfully ends the conversation there. Hugo feels grateful for Melt's boundless cheerfulness at moments like this, yet he remains surprised that she kissed him at all. With the tension easing, Fee excitedly praises Hugo for defeating so many opponents and insists Hugo would not lose even if he fought alone. Hugo disagrees. Although he had been outnumbered, he never truly fought alone. Fee and Melt had been with him, and Fee was the one who handed him the blaster to begin with. Even during the battle with the Magi beast, they protected everyone because Melt fought beside them. In truth, he has never fought alone, he always fights together with someone. He then teaches Fee Hero Code Part 5, to be someone who can bond with others and fight alongside friends. Hugo tells Fee to remember it because it will be on the test, gently patting him, but Fee points out that Hugo still hasn't taught Part 1. Hugo answers that they will cover the rest later once Fee begins to understand what it truly means to be a hero. Fee insists he teach them now, calling him mean. Melt watches their interaction from the side before joining in. She says she is interested in the hero codes too and asks Hugo to teach her, teasing that she will even give him another kiss. Hugo becomes flustered and insists that a girl shouldn't give out kisses so casually. Melt takes hold of his arm and playfully asks if that rule is also part of the hero code, while Fee grabs his other hand. Embarrassed, Hugo snaps at both of them to stop getting carried away. Meanwhile, Zenon sits in his room, angrily throwing furniture to vent his frustration. He cannot understand what is happening. He is certain that the protagonist's charisma should have worked on Claire and the others, so he cannot comprehend why it failed. Although he considers the mob characters irrelevant, he views the potential party members, especially the heroines, as essential to obtain. At that moment, Rush knocks and enters after excusing himself. Zenon immediately changes his tone, pretending to be concerned as he asks Rush about his injuries since he had been beaten so badly. Rush replies that he is fine, but he feels humiliated for losing in front of everyone. Zenon reassures him not to worry, claiming he lost only because Hugo cheated and that everyone knows it. Shocked but trusting Zenon completely, Rush accepts the explanation that Hugo set him up. Zenon feels confident making such claims because, early in the game, Rush Wilhelm indeed has strong starting stats. As a recruitable character, Rush comes equipped with 2 magic tools and a variety of techniques. However, by mid-game, most characters surpass him in raw attack power, turning him into the classic crutch character. Zenon then tells Rush to be confident in himself, believing that although Rush loses today due to his opponent's cowardly tactics, he would have won in a fair fight. Zenon draws on his supposed protagonist's charisma and insists that there is no way Rush would lose to someone as low as Hugo, and Rush agrees. Setting that aside, Zenon decides that they first need to expose Hugo's tricks, and for that he instructs Rush to keep an eye on him. Rush accepts the task, saying he will inform Zenon immediately if he finds anything, as they are comrades who share the same goal. Zenon agrees, and just like that, the system informs him that Rush has been added to his party exactly as he planned, fully aware of the personalities of the game's characters. He simply has to say something pleasant for them to start liking him, and with this he intends to expose Hugo's secret. These two teaming up will eventually cause a major incident in the near future. In that near future, a Magi beast tells Hugo it has been waiting for him, and that once it kills him, the monster will be fully reborn. Hugo declares that he will destroy it to protect those precious to him and commands himself to transform. A few days after the duel with Rush, Hugo expects the beginning of peaceful days. However, they are interrupted by none other than Marcos, who once again challenges him to a duel. This encounter takes place in the forest near the academy, where Hugo has set up a tent. Annoyed, Hugo asks if Marcos is not doing this a bit too early in the morning. Fee then points out that since Marcos lost the duel against Hugo and promised not to come near them again, his current action seems to betray his own word. Marcos agrees, but with a troubled expression he explains that under the current circumstances this is something he cannot ignore. Hearing this, Hugo asks if something has happened. Marcos replies that he heard Hugo used unfair means during his fight with Rush the other day. Before he can finish, Fee insists those are false rumors and Marcos immediately agrees, surprising Fee. Since Marcos has witnessed Hugo's true strength firsthand, he understands that someone like Rush would not stand a chance against him. Hearing this, Melt whispers to Fee that despite everything, Marcos seems to acknowledge Hugo and Marcos can hear it. Ignoring the comment, Marcos continues, explaining that for some reason he has been implicated in the false rumors. Due to claims that Hugo set up the incident in the tunnel, Marcos is now being seen as his accomplice. He is frustrated, wondering how this could happen as he, being a proud member of the Balg family, would never assist in something like that. Understanding the situation, Hugo apologizes, also realizing that Marcos is quite hated himself. Since this now concerns the honor of the Balg house, Marcos challenges Hugo to a duel so he can clear his family's name. However, Hugo points out how meaningless it would be, as no matter how seriously they fight, it will look like a staged match between two despicable noble buddies. Marcos firmly states that he is not Hugo's buddy, though he does not deny that both of them are widely disliked. Setting that aside, Hugo still refuses the duel. But since he too is a noble, he understands Marcos' situation and therefore makes a proposal. Hugo plans to take a quest with Fee and Melt and asks Marcos if he would like to join them. When Marcos looks confused, Hugo explains that they will treat this quest as a contest to see who achieves the better results. If Marcos produces a better result, Hugo will accept the duel. If he loses, he will face no penalty, though the rewards will be split equally. Marcos eagerly accepts Hugo's challenge, confident that he will outperform him.